In this interview right now, we will discuss the protests in Minnesota and what they reveal about the state of American society, the Kremlin's latest statements on negotiations involving Russia, the United States and Ukraine, and how recent talks are being assessed by Western media and analysts. My name is Iryna Uzlova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report in English. Yuri, hello, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What a crazy world. The Ukrainian journalist is interviewing a man originally from Russia living in Wisconsin about Minnesota protests. Let's do it.
Yes, and we see that they are very huge. Really, these days, the protests in Minnesota have once again exposed long-standing social, maybe racial and institutional tensions in the United States. Yuri, do you see these events as a local eruption or a symptom of a deeper systemic crisis in American democracy?
Being a local elected official in the United States, I see firsthand to what extent our society is divided. But we are trying to maintain things on local level by acting responsibly and by treating people with respect. And that's what we do not see happening in Minnesota right now. And we see a situation where American society is divided like it's never been divided before, because the closest I feel like we've been to this was during BLM protests, which happened during the last Trump administration. And now we have these protests that have been caused also starting in the same place practically as where George Floyd was killed in 2020. But now we see that on January 7th, Renee Good was killed. And we see that on Saturday, this past Saturday, Alex Preti was killed. And these are not Latino, these are not black, these are not people of dark skin. These are native English-speaking Americans, the very ones whom Donald Trump was fighting to protest. And especially when we talk about white nationalists and we talk about their concern for white women, this is what is happening right now in the United States. And it is important to acknowledge, for me, as somebody who is a naturalized citizen and looks at this with kind of several perspectives at once, to what extent we see that it is white people that are putting their lives in danger by protecting others, because I feel like white Americans have been raised in the world of privilege, and not just white privilege, but also empathy privilege, and also privilege of living in a state that follows laws and expects others to follow laws. Because when Alex Preti was murdered or executed, or however you want to call it, in Minneapolis, we saw that potentially his First and Second and Fourth Amendment protections were ignored, and that sends a really strong and powerful message to the population, because we see that this is somebody who is of the most upstanding status in the community, because we see this was a nurse who was working in ICU in Veterans Administration. These are people that command universal, immediate respect in American society, because these are people who are taking care of our most precious members of our society, of our veterans. And there's a video now of Alex Preti reading like last rites to a veteran who was passed on, and it's a video that was part of his job that he did. And now this video, these words can be said over him. This murder really blew up America in a way that I haven't seen it in almost 40 years that I lived in the United States. There's been Rodney King riots. There's been different things that have occurred in the United States, but this cold-blooded execution by government forces who claim to have total immunity is something that I've not seen ever in this country. And so this is where people say that this starts to look like Ukraine, and Ukrainians, to whom I give commentary all day long, wonder at what point we're going to realize that the only solution to this is Maidan, which is basically going on the city square, refusing to leave and burning tires and fighting and throwing out your dictator, who similarly to Yanukovych in Ukraine, who came back after a revolution and was elected again. And we see that at the end he was thrown out by Maidan. And this is where Ukrainians Ukrainians have some experience that we in the United States are gaining one day at a time, but very rapidly. And the situation is different in the United States than it is in Ukraine, also because Minnesota, upper Midwest, we're hunting area. Last year, I understand 400,000 hunting permits were given out in Minnesota. That's a lot of people who are willing to sit in cold weather for a chance to shoot a buck. And I think that this is very dangerous, very unsustainable situation that is blowing up in a sense that we see political ramifications, because in the United States, we don't just protest on the street. We also protest through courts, we protest through elections, and we protest through our political process. And we see that Senate right now is looking at shutting down the government because really of this murder that occurred in Minneapolis of Alex Pretty. And it's a very powerful response to, you would think, one person. What does one person matter? But I feel like Alice Pretty is that maybe person that really is maybe the bottom that we needed to hit to understand that we can't go any further. That if Alex Pretty's murder is allowed to go uninvestigated, anyone could be next. Yes, there could be all sorts of arguments made about him having a weapon, but that he had legal permit to have a weapon, that him being very well armed, and you know what, that's what the people are allowed to do, and he showed no interest and no intention to cause any violence or harm. He was just holding a camera and helping a lady who got knocked over. When he was pushed over, they found his gun, looks like freaked out, and executed him. This is a situation that is leading to going to have national ramifications. Absolutely. We see, I get blasts, emails about all the local vigils that are happening around me in support of Minnesota, but this is vigil versus Maidan. There's on one hand, there's a big difference, but on the other hand, I don't know how many steps away we are from a very difficult and horrible situation. This is what we see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about when we are concerned about people, neighbor against neighbor kind of a situation, because we don't have just Democratic and just Republican states. We have people who are neighbors, who could have opposing political views, and people chuckle about it and put out different yard signs during political time, and then they still are neighbors and they're still friends. And that's what this administration is trying to destroy. And we see a situation where if we just wait until elections, we're going to have either a dictatorship or a civil war. And this is where it's so precarious to see the situation that the House of Representatives is in, where one or two people not showing up because they're not feeling well, and Republicans can't conduct business because they don't have a functional majority. And if we have one or two more Republicans who say this is enough and call it quits, and that's what needs to happen. People need to quit on Trump. They need to walk out on him. They need to quit his party. They need to quit those political positions en masse, because it's not about them. It's not about their careers. It's about this country and this world. And that's one way that we can put some kind of brakes on the situation. But this is not something the same as Yanukovych in Ukraine, who refused to go peacefully. Nobody has any illusions that Trump will recognize the folly of his ways and resign. Although I think that's probably the only question that now needs to be asked of him at any press conference is, are you resigning? When are you resigning? The same can be asked of Secretary Noam. When are you resigning? When is the time that you're going to be leaving? And that's the only question. And then I think people should just get up and leave, because I think that's what this administration feeds on, is this constant conflict and noise. And one way that we are combating this is also by saying, turn off the news, turn off social media, stop feeding into this, because it's so important to understand many of the trolls that are feeding us, and that's where we go back to Ukraine, are Russian trolls, are Chinese trolls, who are just trying to get Americans to go against one another in any way possible. And we think that this is just us solving our internal differences. Situation is being portrayed to us virtually even worse than it really is, and it's pretty dreadful as in reality.
Will Trump disperse the protests by force? Will he look for everyone to blame but himself, as Canadian journalist Ala Kaddish suggests in an interview with me? And then what? What's the next steps of American society?
That is a big question that we're trying to understand, because Trump sits in front of a situation where, like when we look at Greenland, when he said, I want this Iceland, 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 and everybody understood that he really wants Greenland, he got talked to, he saw the market dived, and he went, no, there's a framework of a concept of a deal. But in this situation, there's people who are dead. There's real damage that's being done. And yes. Trump, realistically, what we would expect him to do is to pull a taco, which is he runs into a situation that is either difficult or complicated, which may be the same thing, but there are nuances, and he gets out. Except that in this situation, if he gets out, it's going to make him look weak because he gave up. And how does he back out of this without looking weak? Well, of course, he can always declare victory. That's what he always does. Whatever happens, declare victory. So why not just declare victory and get out of Minnesota? That's what the country wants him to do. And so the question is he going to escalate or not? Because escalation means two problems we can't quite imagine right now, but it can possibly lead to impeachment, because he's actively trying to cause civil unrest. But if he backs down, then we see more and more that this is a lame duck president who is weak, who is suing everybody, who is attacking everybody, and as a result looks less serious and less threatening as an individual, as a politician, because he's acting desperate. That's the choice that he put himself in by even moving into Minnesota in the first place. Of course, yes, I agree with Ala Kaddish. He will blame everybody because this president will never take responsibility. Yes. Unfortunately, that's nothing new. And he can blame Homan, he can blame Noam, he can blame lots of people. He's got administration full of people who have done terrible things. And this is like in Stalin's time, where any one of those henchmen, when they're taken down, we can say, wow, another henchman is going down, but it's just internal strife that is happening over there. So I think right now Trump is still not feeling himself. This is a similarity perhaps between Trump and Putin, because they both live in their bubble where people agree with them and tell them everything's great, but people around them may have a slightly different opinion. And right now people around Trump seem to be very concerned about the damage that he's doing to what's left of the Republican brand and how bad this is going to be for politicians in elections. And this is, of course, that's what Trump does. He takes a situation, makes it bad, and then makes it worse. And I think that's what the call is right now. That's what the protests are about. It's not to send message to Trump. Trump is not getting messages like that. He only gets messages when markets collapse. But when people are protesting, those are voters, Those are people who give money, who vote, and that's what the message is to politicians, for some adults in the room to start acting like adults.
According to Reuters, Trump abandoned also a military intervention in Greenland due to the threat of impeachment. Democrats and Republicans are concerned that Trump might launch a military operation in Greenland without first consulting Congress. But how serious was that threat, and how long will it take for Trump to abandon his plans for a conquest?
Well, for what it's worth, this is what I talked about over the last couple of weeks, is that a potential attack and takeover of Greenland could potentially be that impeachment. Yes. That is going to take Trump down, because this is, it's white. It's great. It's which is something that we are supposed to protect in this administration. But instead, we see that this can lead to impeachment for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that it takes a balance of Democrats and Republicans to put together 60 votes. But if you have a few Republicans that are concerned about the cost of Greenland, a few Republicans that are concerned about losing allies, then, you can start to get a little closer to that 60 number. And I think Trump or people around him decided to be nervous and to kind of tackle this one. And what does this mean? Again, it means that Trump has boundaries, that he is not as crazy as people sometimes think he is, which is important because there's a movement out there to try to discredit Trump as being crazy, as dementia. And of course, it's fun and easy to say he's just crazy old fool, which I mean he's acting like it, but he's got a logic there, and I think just ascribing this craziness to him doesn't really even fix the problem. And ultimately, if he was crazy, he would attack Russia once in a while. But since he doesn't seem to have anything but good words for Russia and can't find it within himself to place 10% tariffs on Russia, then it tells me that he's not that crazy. We just don't agree with his logic. And Greenland was supposed to have been a big part of it. And we saw that Trump is weaker than he attempts to be. And so now the question is what happens next? Because Europe, and that's what happens when you punch a bully back, then you go, okay, that was great. Now we can do business again with the bully? Or do you go, wait a minute, I just punched a bully? And I think Europe is having the I just punched a bully moment, which interestingly was vocalized by Prime Minister of Canada, which reminds me to what extent Canada is now starting to act less like a part of United States and our faithful neighbor as somebody who's like cheating on us with the other street. And apparently Canada is like friendly with Europe and China. So Trump is very upset about it, but Carney said some absolutely right things. And considering that Europe now can back it up by having experience standing up successfully to Trump, it makes sense why Trump is so upset about it and is so angry and wants to now place 100% tariffs on Canada. So this is a constant test. And what I think everybody is understanding as well is that just because Trump is stopped today doesn't mean he will stop trying tomorrow. He has like factory settings in there. Like Putin is great. We spent $350 billion on Ukraine and he wants Greenland. And when he's upset, he calls the Prime Minister of Canada the Governor of Canada. That's insulting. And the problem is that we as Americans just kind of go, he didn't attack you. Isn't that great? Isn't that good enough? But the trust has been destroyed. Our allies don't trust us. Our neighbors don't trust us. And we as Americans are now viewed as bullies. Not individually, but as the people that this is the country that we chose. This is Trump didn't come to power by, on January 6, 2021. That's when the Republic defended itself successfully. But he was elected back to office and now he's pushing this policy forward. And I think Americans have a hard time grasping that how much our reputation in the world is changing, in part because it's just another bit of unpleasant news. We are surrounded by a variety of unpleasant news in America because when we don't think about Ukraine or Greenland or Venezuela or Russia or Minneapolis, we think about the fact that artificial intelligence is about to take our jobs away. And it's just not very fun. And we talk about ice in every context now because there's ice in Minnesota. There's ice storm over everything in southern United States, and there's Iceland. I mean Greenland. I mean, who cares that Trump now wants?
But Ala Kadish, whom I've already mentioned, told me that impeachment is almost impossible before the congressional elections.
I think that it is almost impossible, but it is almost impossible. It's basically impossible to imagine for a reasonable person, which I believe Ala Kadish is, to imagine impeachment prior to elections, because that's not how this system works. When you look at math, there is a reasonable person's math that says first you have to have the numbers in the House of Representatives, then you got to have some kind of a coalition, if not the outright numbers in the Senate, and it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to imagine that to be occurring before November 3rd. And it's reasonable, but this administration isn't. And that's what gives me hope. The same way that before there was a standard opinion, which I support, that the only way to defeat Russia is to strike on Moscow. The simple math tells you that if Moscow is not able to function, then the war is not going to continue. But I feel like with this administration, new keys, new threats, new opportunities have emerged where there's more opportunities to remove Putin, because now we can remove Maduro, so why not remove Putin? Those things are no longer impossibilities in this world. So why not? Why can't there be an impeachment? In fact, there could be impeachment today, any day. There's enough Republicans who go, you know what? I value my country over my job.
Yuri, yes, really, to strike at Russia and Putin, that's the way to stop Putin and Russian-Ukrainian war. But Donald Trump doesn't understand this, or no, he doesn't want to understand it, it seems to me, and he needs such all rounds of shows, this show in Abu Dhabi and about negotiations, all this process only for him, without no sense, it seems to me.
You know, what really helped me understand the situation is speaking with Lev Parnas, who is both, I think, interestingly enough, more notable person in English language space than he is in Russian, but he is essentially the person who had Steve Witkoff's job in the first administration. He is of the opinion that we are just watching President Trump following directions of Putin. And for Putin, the peace process is needed because this is actually restraining Ukraine's ability to fully fight back against Russian aggression because, well, there's a peace process. The same thing that is keeping Trump from putting 10% tariffs on Russia is because there's a peace process. So it looks like, it appears to be that Putin is using Trump to defend himself against Ukraine. And in that context, we can see that negotiations could be long and take a while. There's also the Soviet experience, where we see the Soviets negotiated for different agreements for years and years, because that's how they operate. You know, well, here's our demands. Let's talk back to our manager, and our manager says, what do you think? It takes years and years. This is a concept that is very comfortable and familiar to Putin. And by the way, when we talk about panel of peace or whatever the thing that Trump has come up with, when he's selling the seats for a rival league to United Nations, not the first time. He used to own a team in rival league to National Football League. They folded, by the way. National Football League is still doing well. But Trump's got another alternative, institute to UN now. It's this, whatever, Council of Peace, or I don't know what it's called, but it's basically the same thing that Soviet Union used to have, which also was trying to compete with the United Nations by having its own Council of Peace at the end of, that's what they were doing. So these ideas seem not just dumb, but unoriginal, like they're Soviet influence, not even Russian influence, but Soviet influenced. We have a very old operating system in the White House.
Yes, it's a pity. And we see that Kremlin only use this negotiation process like tactical pause to defend Putin and to buy time and reshape the narrative, or even leave the narrative the same.
I think Putin just wants time because he thinks from the reports that he must be getting in his little file folders, because supposedly he is not on internet, although he told Bush in 2004 that he was on internet and he read something. So we see that the Russian aggressor thinks that he's doing well. So he doesn't feel like he needs anything but time to finish the job, because they live under the impression that if it wouldn't be for the United States, Ukraine would fold, which nothing could be further from the truth, because United States is helping less and less, and Russia is still not able to move any further than they have. So there has to be an excuse. Well, it's the United States. Oh, it's Zelensky. Oh, it's something else. Oh, it's something else. But as a result, Ukraine is now looking at a situation where Putin is the one who should be interested in ending the war, because as time goes on, Ukraine is building resources. Ukraine is building its partnerships with European neighbors who are freaked out for good reason, because they understand the United States is not going to save them from Russia, and Ukraine is the only active army on the continent that is ready and is fighting right now already, standing up to Russian aggression. So I think time and ultimately is already working against Putin, But like Trump, who lives in a bubble, he's not able to understand the implications of the reality because he doesn't have access to reality, because Putin is getting his information from file folders produced by his KGB or whatever, FSB, GRU, whatever your favorite acronym, and Trump watches Fox News. And Trump looks at it, and this is what is becoming more and more clear from different sources that we have, really, such as Michael Wolff and others, that this president doesn't have a policy. He just operates based on creating noise, what generates noise. And, as somebody who's been, spent 10 years on YouTube, I can kind of relate to that in a sense that I also understand that there are certain things that if I talk about them, people will pay more attention and so on. But there's certain reasons, like within limit. But Trump has no limit. He doesn't care. He's just a noise generating machine, and he needs to be treated as such. But, he's a president of the United States with access to nuclear weapons. But that's why it's important to see what he does versus what he says, but paying attention to what he says and not ignoring it, because saying that, oh, this is just Trump's sense of humor, you crazy liberals just don't understand. Putin has, also similar sense of humor as Trump does. These people don't have any sense of humor. Let's not humor ourselves. And when Trump announces that he is ready to run for next term and it won't be a joke anymore, what are we going to hear from Republicans? Because we saw the Republicans who said that Greenland was a bad idea. They turned around when president endorsed it and they were like, well, maybe we should, take it. There's going to be Republicans for whatever Trump says. And we see that between 17 and 32% of population is going to be supporting whatever Trump says. But the growing number of Americans are not buying it. And I think that in this situation, Ukraine continues to do a great job diplomatically, because when we see that there's a term of a breakthrough in negotiations, and then the next meeting is not occurring until February 1st, that tells me that we're kind of at a dead end. And what realization that I think everybody's having is that Trump is basically like a brake on what Ukraine is able to do. So he needs to exit the peace process. America at this point is becoming more of a threat than it is of assistance. But I can understand why Zelensky had to say what he did in Davos, because when he is being criticized by Europeans for not being grateful enough, I think about poor Joseph Biden, who is also really getting, really hard words from Ukrainian president, even though he tried so hard to do the best he could to help Ukraine as much as he could. That's part of you working with Ukrainians. They're going to tell you that you're not doing enough, and you know what? They're going to be right. And it's going to suck, and you're going to have to suck it up, and you're going to continue helping Ukraine. And that was the case with Biden, and now it's the case with Europe, because Europe has to help Ukraine no matter if Ukraine is calling them out or the fact that they're not doing enough or not. And in that sense, I guess I could say that Europe would be helping Ukraine no matter what. But I think in a situation where we have this president who is acting in a manner that is threatening to European survival, I think respect for Ukrainian president and words and action is backed up by actions of Ukraine's army. And that's what I think is deserves all the respect in the world.
Thank you. Thank you for these words and for all your words and opinions today. Yuri, thank you very much. See you next week in this format. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report in English. My name is Iryna Uzlova. Guys, thank you for joining and watching us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, please, and subscribe Yuri Rashkin. See you. Take care.